Welcome to the History Slam podcast from ActiveHistory.ca. Here's your host, Sean Graham.
Thank you, Adam. Welcome to the History Slam, everybody. I am Sean Graham, coming at you today nearly live from Ottawa, Ontario. It is our first episode in about 6 weeks or so, as we're coming back off a bit of a hiatus. I just want to say off the top of the show, this is the first episode we've done since the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a pandemic, and since the Ontario government declared a state of emergency. There's state of emergencies across the country, across the world right now. We are well aware on the show, the people who are involved in this, of what's going on. And there's a lot of great work by historians right now to put what's happening in context and provide information for folks. That's not what we're going to do on this show. For the next few weeks, we're going to do stuff that's a little lighter in content and in the discussions. We're still going to look at historical issues and historical topics. We're just going to do it in a way that is a little more fun. I think, at least for me personally, we could use a bit of a distraction from the reality of the situation, and that's what this show is going to try and do for the next few weeks. And I thought, to kick that off, there are no better people to bring on than the man, the myth, the legend, Aaron Boyes, Mike Thompson, Jeremy Garrett, the three of whom are here, and we are going to talk about historical hockey figures. The NHL playoffs would have started at some point in the next week, I think. And normally we all get together, or we have all gotten together, and done a fantasy draft for the playoffs. We have a bet, and the winner gets a trophy. The loser also gets a trophy that they have to display in their house to demonstrate how terrible they are. And we decided to do this, but with historical figures. I'll explain the format in a minute, but first, gentlemen, welcome.
Thanks for having me back on.
Always a pleasure, Aaron. Mike, welcome back to the show.
Thanks very much. Happy to be here.
And Jeremy, this is your first time since your child was born, and I think we informed the people that Aaron and I got it wrong when we tried to name your baby.
That's correct, and I think this is my third time on the show.
Yes, so welcome back to all of you. So what we did is that and Pat Fournier couldn't be here today, but he's part of this as well, and I will sort of pseudo defend Pat's team. So what we did, there's a website called What If Sports, and what it allows you to do is draft teams across eras and simulate a season for those teams to see how they would do. You could also have teams that you draft and they go head to head against each other. So what we've done is Aaron, Mike, Pat, and Jeremy each submitted a team to me. I put those teams into the What If simulator, and we have the results. So the guys know the teams, but I'm the only one currently who knows the results. And what we're going to do is go around. Each person will discuss their teams and try to defend their team. And then we'll go through to see what the results were. So picking at random, and by random I mean the team with the most players that I'd never heard of. Jeremy Garrett, go first. Who's on your team? The way we did it, 2 lines and 2 pairs of defensemen and a goalie. I rounded out the team, and I'll explain how I did that at the end. But Jeremy, please defend your team. Well, first identify and then defend your team.
Well, I mean, I don't know how you don't know most of the guys on this team, but anyway.
I didn't say most, but it has the most of all the teams. It had the most players who I'd never heard of, and by that I mean 1.
All right.
It had a player I'd never heard of.
I'll ask after who that is, but on left wing I have Alex Ovechkin and Johnny Busey. At center, of course, had to take the great one, Wayne Gretzky, and also took Mario Lemieux. Right wing, I have Jaromir Jagr and Guy Lafleur. Left defense, I took Paul Coffey and Nicholas Lidstrom. Right defense, I have Al McGinnis and Ray Bourque. Now, I recognize that Ray Bourque is a left shot, but trying to fill it out. And for goal, I took Patrick Waugh. Now, to defend this, I mean, some of these are fairly easy. You have Wayne Gretzky. I'm sure everyone took Wayne Gretzky. And then from there on, I mean, you have personal preference. For me, I took Ovechkin looking at his potential. He's still playing. He's ranked quite high in the amount of points. I believe he's in the top 20 now. Sorry, he's now 36th.
Number 2 in goals, though.
Pardon?
Number 2 in goals.
Yes. I'm looking at overall points as well. I mean, you have your goals, but your assists are also important in setting up those future goals as well. So again, took Ovechkin for the future potential that of where he's going to land up on this overall list. Next is Johnny Busey. It was a tough one here. I struggled with left wing actually quite a bit, and then started trying to look up a lot of the different left wings and also what some of our colleagues took. A lot of them actually took Bobby Hull, from what I noticed, and trying to look it up, I realized that actually Busey, he from the natural left wing position, is ranked actually a lot higher than a lot of people recognize for points. So I threw him in there. Also, very well known Boston Bruin, led the team for a number of years. So I thought, and from what I read, while he was known as the clean player, he liked to give out huge hip checks. So I wanted someone with a bit of grit to round out my left wings. Again, I'm not even going to try and defend Wayne Gretzky. I mean,
yeah, you don't have to.
That just speaks for himself.
He's the only player who was picked across all 4 teams.
Yeah. And then there's Lemieux. I mean, again, an amazing player. Unfortunately, his career was cut short with a lot of health issues. But as a result, I think that you could have seen him a lot higher had he been able to remain healthy. Yager was he was an interesting one because if we only pull the NHL records, then he isn't quite as high. But of course, he went and played in Russia for quite a while as well. I remember when he got traded from the Penguins to the Capitals. I mean, didn't do very well in Washington, but overall, I really liked his style of play. Moving on, Guy Lafleur. I mean, well-known Montreal Canadian. High point count. Again, trying to be a little separate from some of our colleagues. So went there. On defense, Nicholas Lidstrom, amazing defenseman. Actually, funny enough, when I started doing hockey pools a long time ago, he was one of the defensemen I always tried to get. Always could rely on him. I was really happy. Paul Coffey, I mean, another amazing defenseman. I actually knew about him because I believe that there was a TV show called Making the Cut where amateur hockey players went on a reality TV to try and make a chance to come into the playoffs, and he was actually one of the guest defensemen that they had to play against. Al McGuinness on right defense.
You're showing your age there, man. Like that's Paul Coffey.
Al McGuinness, again, played for St. Louis for quite a long time. Amazing defenseman, plenty of goals. I actually remember when he retired as well. And similar to Ray Bourque as well. Where it got really interesting was goalie. I was actually between 3. I was between Patrick Waugh, Martin Brodeur, both amazing goalies, all-stars, NHL Hall of Fame players, you name it. But I gave the edge to Waugh. I believe that he still has some of the records over Martin Brodeur. Now, I could easily be wrong there. And the third one I was actually looking at was Jacques Plante. I mean, for the historical aspect of introducing the goalie mask, but also his record speaks for himself. So that would be a lot of the justification for my team.
Yeah, I think you're hard pressed on the goalie to say Patrick Waugh isn't one of the greatest of all time. I think he gets a little hurt just in the early part of his career based on, it's the end of that scoring surge of the 80s into the early 90s. So that hurts his, goals against average, shave percentage, that kind of stuff, just the era that he played in. But we'll get to what Pat's team is. You got a goalie who played pretty much his whole career in the 80s, and those guys just statistically get hurt compared to people who played, especially late 90s when nobody was scoring.
Exactly, yeah.
So that's Jeremy's team. So we'll move on to so the player I never heard of was Johnny Busey, by the way. So I had never heard of him, and I'm not the only one because he does not have a Wikipedia page, although it's offering me to create one right now. So there you go. He is a Hall of Famer, but no Wikipedia page.
Just to correct you, he does have a Wikipedia page.
Not okay, fine. The Wikipedia page is not linked from the Hockey Hall of Fame list.
Oh, that's quite possible.
How's that? All right, Jeremy. While you're listening to Mike, link it up. Fix that. Fix Wikipedia. So next up, we'll go to Mike. There is some overlap here, Mike. So let's identify the overlap, but also I think more importantly talk about the differences between your and Jeremy's team.
All right, so I take your show and your podcast super seriously. So after I remembered that you had asked me to do this, and I had to submit my team that day, I spent like a solid 5-7 minutes scribbling down names on a sticky note. I did zero statistical analysis. I wrote down names kind of like a gut check. I didn't really.
I think that's good though, Mike. I think it should be like the gut reaction. I kind of like that. Yeah, I like that visceral immediacy.
That's what it was. So I kind of started out by scribbling down 4 lines for each position, and then just kind of whittled away. And I found this was the exercise, if you indulge me for a second, was interesting in that it was hard and not hard at the same time. It's hard because you're you can choose 2 centers from all time. How are you going to choose? There are so many great centers. But at the same time, when you're stressing about, short list, I had, Phil Esposito's on my short list. It's man, I'm leaving Phil Esposito, not on my list. But it's okay, so you don't take Esposito, but then you take Wayne Gretzky. You know what I mean? It's oh, I really wish I could take Crosby if I had more lines. It's oh, I end up with Mario Lemieux. So it was kind of interesting that it's hard, but at the same time, it's easy because when you're only dealing with a handful of players from all of these greats, from all time, you kind of can't go wrong unless the simulator tells me that I did terribly, but that's how I felt. So my centers, I took Gretzky, of course, and then my next one, Super Mario. Mario Lemieux is a beast. He's a points beast. And that's a guy who was allowed to get checked, unlike Wayne Gretzky. That's a guy who body checked, unlike Wayne Gretzky. So, I mean, those are not even anything for position, just all-time greatest players. That's the number 1, number 2 all-time greatest NHL players. So I went with them. But I struggled. Like I said, Esposito was there. Messier was my childhood hero. He didn't make the cut. Crosby. The other thing that was kind of tricky about choosing the team was I wasn't sure to the degree to which the simulator was going to account for different eras. Obviously players today are stronger and faster. So I mean, you drop Gretzky into today, how well would he do? You put Gretzky or you put Crosby back in the day, he would crush people. So I wasn't sure if it was just going based on stats. So I was a little bit unsure of how balanced to make the team in terms of a little bit more current era. But I just went with my gut. So like I said, Gretzky and Mario are my centers. Left wing, I got Ovechkin. Says a little bit of modern balance, incredible goal scorer on the left side. And then Bobby Hull, another beast on the left. On the right, I went with Maurice Richard. Got to go with the Rocket. I don't think there's much you really need to say about him. In his era, he was the premier goal scorer. He was insanely good. My other right winger, Mike Bossy, one of the best pure goal scorers in NHL history, in my opinion. His stats, 570 plus goals in 750 games, 1,100 points in 752 games. His playoff production is insane. He's cut short. His career's cut short by injury. But he's got 9 straight 50-plus goal seasons to start his career. I mean, the guy is an absolute beast. So then my defense, I found the left side was a little bit harder if you're trying to stick to people's natural sort of positions. I mean, if you look down the left, you got like Stevens and Niedermeyer and Lindstrom, but I went with Raybork and Denny Potvin. And I think, I'm not sure anybody else took Potvin, but Potvin is one of the greatest defensemen of all time. He was the anchor of the New York Islanders dynasty. He's got over 1,000 points, over 300 goals in 1,000 games. He's like a point per game for a defenseman. Absolute beast. Right side, Bob Orr. How do you not take Bob Orr if you're taking the all-time best? And then Paul Coffey. Like I said, I didn't really look up stats. I knew that the simulator was going to be weighted towards offense. So in my mind, I was looking for purely offensive-minded defensemen. I wasn't sure if the simulator would take into account plus-minus at all. So out of curiosity, I just went and looked at the plus-minus stats. And I ended up with, I think 3 of my 4 are in the top 5 in terms of plus-minus. I think Potvin, Bork, and Orr are all, and I might be wrong, but I think they're all top 5 all-time plus-minus. Paul Coffey is much lower, but Paul Coffey was when I was playing as a kid, defenseman. Paul Coffey was a hero of mine, so happy to have him, even if he's not maybe if he's not as gifted as some of the other guys that I use. And then for D, what's the last position? Goalie. I took the Dominator, Dominic Hasek. I mean, I think this guy's like first place in save percentage all time. I think he's like maybe second most games played by European-born goaltender. I think if you look at a lot of the stats, shutouts, lowest goals against average, most wins, I think he's in the top 10 of all of those sort of like major stat categories. So I kind of figured a lot of guys were maybe going to go Patois or some of the other ones, but I think I was trying to be a little bit different because I was a little bit afraid that our teams were all going to look super similar. So the goaltender was a conscious decision to sort of maybe go a little bit of a different way, but still make it a smart pick. So that's my team. And I don't know who you chose as our second 2 lines. I'm sure they're fantastic.
They are great. They are absolutely great. I will say, though, about Dominic Hasek, for my money, as someone who grew up in the 90s, watching a lot of, their Buffalo games on relatively frequently when he was still in Buffalo, the most exciting goalie that I've ever watched. Goalies, it's hard for goalies to be exciting because they stop the exciting things from happening, but he was an exciting goalie, if that makes sense.
He had his style was just stop the puck. So it's you got butterfly and you got you can talk about the different approaches to being a goaltender. His approach was just put something in the way of the puck so it doesn't go in the net. So he's stacking pads and he's rolling around. The only other guy who kind of came close to that was it Tim Thomas during those Boston Bruins cup run. Thomas was a little bit kind of Dominator in the sense that he's just sort of just flopping and he ends up backwards and so he's Dominator was super fun to watch. I agree.
Yeah. So there's Mike's team, solid squad, I think, but we have yet to hear from the man, the myth, the legend, Aaron Boyes, and I expected a little more Maple Leaf content. Certainly from both you and Mike, but certainly from you, Aaron.
I almost put Aki Berg on there. How can I not? They were close.
That would have been the greatest thing ever. Aki Berg.
I resigned from this. The fact that I didn't put Aki Berg on my team, I don't deserve to win. One thing I want to say off the top before I start talking about my team. This is a little difficult, and I'm afraid to see what lines you picked because, Sean, you're a notorious puck hater sometimes, and you're more about the hoops, and so your knowledge about the NHL is a little bit lower, and so I'm afraid that you're going to skew this a little. Is that fair?
No, because, okay.
You're not.
I'm not. It wouldn't be skewed in favor of anybody, at least, because everybody in the simulator had the same last 2 lines and last 4 defensemen and backup goalie.
Braddock, no, put my mind at ease. It's okay. It's okay,
All right, so who you got?
Okay, so, like the other guys, well, you know how most people, it's been told, do their best thinking when they're in the shower. I do my best thinking when I'm walking the dog. So on a couple nights, I would take the dog out, and this is what I thought of. And so, like Mike and Jeremy, I wasn't sure, obviously, how the simulator was going to process this all, but I tried to pick a team that was going to win hockey games. They didn't have to win 8, by scoring 8 goals or any of that. I was looking for a combination of goal scorers and grit that are going to keep the puck away from you and are going to win by grinding you down. So that's kind of the mindset that I had. So my team, I'll start in center spot, of course, Wayne Gretzky. That goes without saying. The great one, the most points ever recorded. On Gretzky's left wing, I've got Bobby Hull, already mentioned, one of the elite goal scorers in NHL history. And on his right wing, I've got Maurice Richard, once again, another elite goal scorer. And I thought the three of them playing on a line together would just be deadly. They would control the puck the entire time and obviously would put it in the back of the net. Centering my second line, I picked a Pittsburgh Penguin, but I went with Sidney Crosby. I went with Crosby because this guy's won everything. He's won at every level he's ever played in. He's an elite player. Very polarizing. His early years in his career, he was a bit of a whiner, and I personally didn't like watching him because of that, but he's showed his maturity, and he's led the Penguins to 3 cups, has been an excellent captain, and like I said, he's a winner, and so I wanted him on my team. On his right wing, I went with Gordie Howe. Now, I went with Gordie Howe because, well, the Gordie Howe hat trick. This guy was a tough SOB. He was going to stick up for Crosby, and that's what I wanted. I wanted someone out there to give Crosby the time and space to be able to do his, work his magic. Gordie Howe, not only was he tough as nails, he was a great goal scorer. He was a fierce competitor. He famously quipped, of course, that all hockey players are bilingual. Everyone spoke English and profanity. So Gordie Howe, really great for those sound bites as well. And then on the left wing, I've got Frank Mahovlich.
It's really important to choose the guys with the soundbite stats. I can't wait to see if the simulator takes into account the soundbite stat and the grit stat.
This is what I told you. This is why I built my team differently than what the simulator wanted, Michael. So we'll see what happens.
Why would you do that, though?
I don't know. Why not?
I guess that's true. Why not?
You wanted Aki Berg on your team.
We all
do.
There's
no better grit guy than Aki Berg.
No one's willing to admit it. We all want Aki Berg on our team, and Wade Belak. Make us all better.
That's debatable.
Love it. Yeah, Frank Mahovlich is my first Maple Leaf that shows up on the team. I had to have at least one. Obviously, Sean alluded to it. I'm a diehard Maple Leafs fan. I've got to represent my team anytime I can. But Frank Mahovlich, once again, another amazing player. Played over 1,100 games in the NHL. Won numerous Stanley Cups with the Toronto Maple Leafs. I wanted, as I said, I wanted winners. I wanted guys that know what it takes to win, and I thought Frank Mahovlich was a great representation there. As for defense, on left D, I've got Bobby Orr. Once again, not much needs more to be said. The only thing I will add, of course, is that he basically created the offensive defenseman. This idea that you don't have to be a stay-at-home defenseman, that get into the play, and we've seen many players recreate that, especially in this year in the NHL. On his right, I've got Chris Chelios. Now, I picked Chris Chelios because, once again, longevity. This guy just played. He constantly played. You could always rely on Chris Chelios to take a shift. And I wanted that. I wanted a guy that I knew I could rely on. So that's why I picked Chelios.
Are we sure that he is retired?
No.
I'm sure he's playing in some, third-tier minor league somewhere.
Guaranteed he is. You're right. So that made
some Belarusian.
Yeah.
If that qualifies him because he's still an active player, I apologize. And then I went with Nick Lidstrom on the left D. Once again, a steady defenseman. Led Detroit all those years when Detroit was just winning cup after cup after cup. And on right D, paired up with Lidstrom, I went with my second Maple Leaf, Tim Horton. Once again, you got a winner. You've got a guy who's tough as nails, a guy who you don't want to play against. He's going to make your life miserable. And so that was kind of my mindset there. And as for goaltender, I went with Martin Brodeur, all-time shutouts leader. I believe he's all-time in wins as well. If not, he's number 2 behind Waugh. Obviously, his career lasted a little bit longer than Patrick Waugh, and all the goaltenders that are picked so far, I don't think you can go wrong with. That's, I think, the advantage of this, that you only have to pick one, and there have been so many. The only thing about Brodeur is seeing him play in a St. Louis Blues jersey was very bizarre. I really thought that he should have retired a Devil, but that's neither here nor there. So anyway, that's my team, and yeah, we'll see what the simulator thought.
Yeah, the one that surprised me on your list, Aaron, was Tim Horton, just because I think the fact that the restaurant has sort of outstripped him as a player, and I think in the popular consciousness, there's this notion that he wasn't a great player because of the restaurant, for some, if that makes any sense. But like, you know, he played almost 1,500 games in the league and was around forever, and as you say, won. So, but it's this weird dynamic where it's hard for me to wrap my head around, you know, Tim Horton, the namesake of a donut place, and Tim Horton, a hockey player.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. And the fact that I think part of it that's tough as well is Tim Horton died in 1974, so none of us would have had a chance to watch him play live. But from anecdotes that I've heard and through family and such like that, like, he was a great hockey player. But I totally understand what you're saying, Sean. It's, you know, you hear the name Tim Horton and you think of the restaurant chain, not the Canadian ice hockey player. You think of the conglomerate that's owned by a Brazilian billionaire.
Yeah, and he was still active, which is crazy that he was still active, right? He made his debut in the NHL in the 49-50 season. He died in 1974, and he had played a game in Toronto the night before. Like, just, these guys had crazy long careers. So Pat's team, I will represent Pat's team, in part because I sort of picked it, but Pat is a big Edmonton Oilers fan, and to make it interesting and different from what everyone else was doing, we went through and picked the all-time greatest Edmonton Oilers to represent Pat. So on the first line, on the left wing, you have Ryan Smith, one of the great gritty players who you think of, and I remember Ryan Smith because, for my money, the greatest rivalry and the most fun that I've ever had watching hockey was those late 90s, early 2000s Edmonton Oilers, Dallas Stars games, especially the playoffs. They played each other in the playoffs multiple times, back-to-back years. Those games were so much fun to watch because those teams hated each other. And Ryan Smith was at the center of that, of course, on the Oilers side. And for my money, I've never had more fun watching games than watching those Stars-Oilers games. Then up the middle on that first line, Wayne Gretzky, of course, the only guy who's on all four teams. On the right side, Glenn Anderson, I think underrated scorer on those championship Oilers teams from the 80s. And the rest of the list is pretty much 80s Oilers. Second line, Esa Tikkanen on the left side, Jari Kurri on the right side, and then somebody who I was pretty surprised that nobody else picked, Mark Messier up the middle on that second line, greatest captain in all of sports.
He's my all-time favorite. I felt really, there was a little bit of sadness, that a little regret, I'll say, that I didn't put Messier on my team just because of what he meant. But that goes back to it, like, there's just so many, like, Jari Kurri was on my short list. There's just so many guys, and it's like, you can't go wrong either way, I guess. But
Messier, and I can agree with that too. I mean, I had Messier as a third center for mine, but it comes down to, like Mike said, who do you pick for center? There's just so many great ones.
Yeah, and I think too is as Mike alluded to when he was describing his team, that you just don't know what the simulator is going to value. Is it going to value straight offensive stats? Whereas a lot of Messier's value, at least, you know, the way his teammates talk, is in that leadership role.
Yeah,
I mean,
like,
great player,
when he before, you know, a crucial playoff game, he says, "I guarantee we're gonna win," and now all the pressure's on him, and he goes out and gets a hat trick in that game to win that game. Like, the simulator can't take that into account. So if you're talking anecdotally, yeah, like, Messier is just insane, and obviously potato chips, right? Like we all love potato chips. Great potato chip salesman, but the simulator doesn't take that into account. So you're right. Like you just don't know what that simulator's thinking in there. Like what kind of what synapses are Skynet simulators sort of like firing in there? You have no idea.
No. So that's those are the forward lines, greatest Oilers ever. On the back end, Paul Coffey, who's been named before, prolific scorer for the Oilers there, again during their great run. Kevin Lowe, of people my generation at least, better known as a coach and executive, solid defenseman. Chris Pronger, his best years were not in Edmonton, but I'm putting him on this team because he played for the Oilers. And then another player who I was unfamiliar with, Charlie Huddy, is on this list as well. He played 1,000 games in the NHL, majority of those for the Oilers on those great Oiler teams. He had a couple good offensive seasons, 82-83, had 57 points, and he was in the 40s, 50s a couple other times in his career. So a solid defenseman there for those championship Oiler teams. And then this is where, which we'll talk about, where I think Pat really gets crushed, is in the goaltender category. Grant Fuhr is who I picked as the greatest Oiler goalie of all time. No doubt that he's a great goaltender, great player, but he played in an era where teams were scoring 12 times a night. So it just statistically, again, if the simulator is going to value the goals against average, shave percentage, it's just going to be lower for Grant Fuhr than the guys who came later. So that is Pat's team representing the greatest Oilers of all time. Now, I know everybody is on the edge of their seat wondering how I filled out these rosters. And I did something that I thought was the most fair to do. I went through and looked at every NHL season between 1974-75 and 1991-92. So that stretch of 17 years where they played 80 games. Before that, they played a few years of 78, 76, 74 before that. Then for 2 years in the 90s, they played 84 games for some reason before the lockout shortened the season, and then they eventually got to the 82, which we know today. But for 17 years, we have 80-game seasons. So I went through each of those seasons, and I wanted to find the most average team in the league during those 17 years. I was very excited. I found a lot of teams that had 80 points in 80 games. The Atlanta Flames of 76-77 were one, the 78-79 Kings. But once I started to get options for a lot of teams who had 80 points in 80 games, I went to goals for and against to be the determinant of who was the most average team in the league during that stretch. And the surprising to me winners of that distinguished award are the 1990-1991 Edmonton Oilers, who 80 points in 80 games. They went 37-37-6, 22-15-3 at home, 15-22-3 on the road, exact inverse home and away. And then the beautiful part of this, they scored 272 goals and they gave up 272 goals. So I picked players from that team, the back end of that team, because as the front end of that team was pretty good. They got besieged by injuries, which is why they were so bad. But Messier was still there, and some other players. So on the lines for these guys, you have people like Kelly Buchberger, Joe Murphy, a very young Martin Gelinas was on that team. Anatsi Semenov, who I don't know who that is, Dave Brown, Kari Tako, I picked as the backup goalie. Several goalies played on that team. On the back end, people like Jeff Smith, Craig Muni, Chris Joseph, and of course, everyone's favorite, Jeff Bukaboom was on that team, Mark Lamb as well. So those are the players that filled out the back end of the roster. So, gentlemen, do you take any issue with the selection process through deciding the rest of the players?
No, I think that makes sense, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. But if I'm understanding this correctly, then what your reasoning for this? Then you take like the most average dudes you could find. Then the point is then our personal sort of choices in the the first two lines, which are like all-star lines, that's going to be the difference maker, right? This is your reasoning to like let our choices.
That is the reasoning. Yeah, is that the back end, those third, fourth line guys, they're going to be average, so it's not going to bring anyone. It's not going to bring like the overall quality down, and it's not going to bring it up either. It's just sort of total average, and then let the front line guys be the determinant.
Fine with me.
I like it.
All right.
With me too.
So, here's what we've done in terms of the simulation. 4 teams, and we did a 30 game season in which each team played the other team 10 times, and you could set it home versus road. So you played 15 home games, 15 road games, no ties, also no shootouts. I put it on playoff rules because I don't know, 3-point games are dumb. And
it's not hockey.
Yeah. So
that's a skills competition.
A couple games did go to double overtime and all that kind of stuff. So 30 games, 10 against each team, 15 home, 15 away. I'm just curious, guys. Let's start. We'll do it in the order that you announced your teams. What do you think your record was now that you've heard everybody's teams, heard the rationale, now you know the rest of your roster? How many games do you think you won? Let's start with Jeremy.
That's a tough one. I mean, a lot of these teams, repeating players, all are great players. I think the better question would actually be how close were each of these games? For my own team, you said it was 30 games played?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd go with 20 to 23 range.
Okay. 20 to 23 range. All right. Mike, what about you?
I have no idea. My guess would be something similar. My guess is, I'm not sure about Pat's team. My guess is, looking at my team and Aaron's team and Jeremy's team with the overlap of some of the players, I have a feeling that whatever the numbers are, I think the numbers are going to be pretty close between them. I'm not sure anybody's got like a huge runaway team here. But 30 games, I'm going to be bold. I'm going to be confident. I'm going to say I won like 26 games. Let's do it.
26-4 is your
Yeah. Let's do
that. Aaron, what about you?
I'm a Leafs fan, so I have the most confidence in the world, but I'm also subject to reality, and so I have a feeling that I won 12 and lost 18.
12 and 18, okay. And before I did the simulation, representing Pat, I was very pessimistic about Pat's chances, just because you're limited to one team. And yes, they were great teams, certainly, but not quite to the all-star caliber. So I thought when I started that Pat's team would win 7 games, go 7-23.
That's harsh.
And
That's harsh.
Yeah, that is. Well, it was mostly because of the goalie. I figured in the simulator, just goals against average being that much higher for Grant Fuhr would be a death nail for him. So Jeremy brought up a good point. Were these games close? So the way it works in this simulator is that you simulate one game at a time, and it brings up a box score for you, which has time on ice, it has penalties, it has who scored and who scored when, and all that kind of stuff. And it was really interesting. So I went through. I kept track of home and road record, as well as goals for and against for each team, and I have a list in front of me of all the games and the scores of each of those games. And I am very proud to announce that I was correct, that Pat's team was the worst. They did not go 7-23, though. They went 12-18 in the simulation, a record of 8-7 at home, 4-11 on the road. Home ice, you'll notice a trend here, guys. Home ice really did seem to matter in the simulator, with goals against of -30, gave up 172 goals in 30 games. Another trend you'll notice is very high scoring. A lot of these games, there were some 10-8 games in here. It was not uncommon for teams to put up 8-9 goals, which is not surprising given the firepower on the top two lines, but 172 goals in 30 games, I was very surprised by. So Pat finishes at 12-8. Is anybody surprised that Pat's team finished last?
I wouldn't say I'm surprised that his team finished last. I'm a little surprised at the record in comparison to some of the other teams, though.
Yeah, so in terms of, we'll go through the straight-up matchups at the end once we've announced everyone, but he did okay in a couple of the matchups that, there's just one matchup that really skewed him lower. So overall, not bad. So let's move up. Third place, the team that finishes third, the person who was closest to their guess on their record, the man, the myth, the legend, Aaron Boys. You finish 13-17 for your season, 10-5 at home, 3-12 on the road. But, and this is where sample size could be a factor in here, that even though it's 30 games, 10 against each of the other teams, still a relatively small sample size because you go 4 games under 500, Aaron, but you are plus in the goals for against category, scoring 161, giving up 158. So you would think you'd be a game or two closer to 500 with that goals for and against, but a 13-17 mark.
Ouch.
You thought you'd win 12. It's better than what you guessed.
I know,
Yeah,
but
seriously.
obviously I didn't pick very well for the simulator.
Wow, Frank Mahovlich.
Tim Horton.
I mean, Frank Mahovlich, good player.
Yeah, hey,
Second best left winger of all time.
I'm a diehard Leafs fan, and we're talking greatest Leafs of all time team. Like, yeah, sure, they can be on there, but
Yeah, so that's a bit tough. So it came down in the end between Mike and Jeremy. One of these teams went 19-11. The other team went 16-14.
yeah, close, eh?
Yeah, so it was within 3 games. And congratulations, Mike Thompson. Your team
Noise.
is the champion.
Noise.
So Jeremy's team 16-14, but this is remarkable. 13-2 at home, a terrible 3-12 record on the road. Jeremy, you got to pick guys who can travel, be able to play on the road. Scored 172, giving up 161 in those 30 games. Jeremy.
Ouch.
So just I'm curious. Can you just indulge me for a second? Remind me, because these two teams have a fairly close record. So I had Ovi and Bobby Hull on the left, Gretzky, Super Mario, and then I had Bossy and Richard on the right. What were Pat's forwards, out of curiosity?
So Pat's were Ryan Smith, Wayne Gretzky, Glenn Anderson, Esa Tikkanen, Mark Messier, and Jari Kurri.
Oh, so not a huge amount of overlap there, eh? And then on defense, maybe we had some overlap. I had Potvin, Bork, Orr, and Coffey.
With Pat's team, only Paul Coffey is the overlap.
Seriously, fascinating.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So
One thing that comes to mind, sorry to interrupt, I'm just really curious what the records would have been like if you had, say, the overtime loss that they have now. Because just how you mentioned with mine, had a plus goal differential, but 4 games below 500. Like with the new NHL, you're easily looking at fake 500, wouldn't you guys think?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I will say this, Aaron, in your matchup with Mike, you guys played as if you were actually playing. Yeah. The two of you had three consecutive overtime games. Game 6, 7, and 8 of that series all went to overtime. Mike won 2 of them. So yeah, you're right. If in the new rules, that's 2 losses that are converted to, like, I call them the orange slice points.
Yeah. No, and I'm not disputing the results. I'm just more pointing out how interesting it is, like how the NHL really wouldn't be as on par, if you will, if it were back to these rules.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's fake parody.
Yeah, it's fake parody, exactly. Oh, and that.
Yeah.
I mentioned. I find that really, really interesting how close it can be. Yet, a loss is a loss.
So can you can you see the stats in terms of like player stats, like whose goals, assists, like does that information come out the other? I'm curious to know of these players, like who came out as like the best goal scorer or something. And also, I'm curious to know. You can tell me if you have this kind of information, but where you have overlap player like Gretzky's on all the teams, was he like the highest goal scorer for all of them? Was Super Mario on my team, not as good as Mario on another team? Do you have these kinds of like overall stats?
So I didn't keep the
player stats,
the specific stats for each player. I did though sort of look through the box scores after each game, and yeah, Wayne Gretzky was by far the most common name to appear on the box scores. So he was all over it for both teams all the time. In sort of anecdotally looking at the rest of it, I think where the difference was, Mike, is defensively, because your team gave up the fewest goals by far, right? 15 fewer goals than Aaron's team. You also scored the least, but other than Pat.
On defense or overall?
Overall. So you scored 153 and you gave up 143. So, the algorithm of that type of goal differential wouldn't quite lead you to a +8 normally, but compared to everybody else, when you're giving up that many fewer goals, I think the takeaway for me at least is that the simulator did value defense in some manner, right? It wasn't just about offensive defensive play, even though your team does have great offensive defensive players.
Yeah, that's interesting because that's what I chose them thinking offensive mind, and like I said, after the fact, I went and I looked up the all-time NHL defensemen, and I sorted plus minus, and I ended up with 3 in the top 5. So I just ended up choosing guys who were great both ways. But the other thing it's hard to know when you're giving up that many fewer goals if it's purely defense or to what degree the goalies made a difference too, I guess.
Yeah, and I don't know how much puck luck factors into the simulator either, right? If it goes off a guy's skate, then that happens.
Yeah, like I said, Hasek, one of my reasons for taking him is I think he's like the best in terms of save percentage, I think, all time, something like that. So it's interesting. I thought the simulator would just be purely based on offense, but I guess it is taking into account defense in some way.
Yeah, in some capacity, there was some sort of acknowledgement of a need to play defense in here some way. I will also say that by far, Jeff Bukaboom had the most penalty minutes in the simulation, by far. It seemed like he fought himself a couple times too, which was great fun. So also within this, the other thing that mattered, Mike, to your victory is that you had the most road wins here. You had 7 road wins, which was the most out of anybody else. Still under 500 on the road, but most professional teams will say, if you can go 500 on the road, 7 and 8, close enough, and then hold for it at home, then you're fine. So 7 and 8 on the road, it's pretty good. I gave each of you different home ices. Mike and Aaron, I gave you both Maple Leaf Gardens. Jeremy, I gave you the old Ottawa Civic Center, and I gave Pat the Rexall Place or Rexall, whatever it's called. So the ability, and again, small enough sample size, I don't know if it matters or if it's enough to really tell, but Mike, at the very least in this simulation, you built a team that was better prepared to play on the road than anybody else.
That's good to know. I did not think about that at all. Zero thought to that, but there you go.
So the other thing I will say, I went through and found the players who were specific to your teams, and just curious if Wayne Gretzky offsets Wayne Gretzky on all the teams. Here are who was unique to you. So Jeremy, Johnny Busey was unique. Lafleur, Al McInnes, and Patrick Waugh. The goalies were unique just across the board. Those were your unique players. Mike, it was Mike Bossy, Denny Potvin, and Dominic Hasek. Aaron, Frank Mahovlich, Sidney Crosby, Gordie Howe, which is shocking to me that nobody else picked Gordie Howe, Chris Chelios, Tim Horton, and Marty Brodeur, and then everybody on Pat's team other than Gretzky was unique to Pat. Oh, and Paul Coffey, sorry. So, I guess what we could take away from this, Mike, is that perhaps Mike Bossy, Denny Potvin, and Dominic Hasek are in fact the greatest players of all time.
Yeah, I mean that's obviously the takeaway. Like this scientific analysis leads me to believe that that's 100%.
Mike Thompson is the greatest general manager in hockey history.
Yeah, no, yeah. Well, that's the other. I wasn't gonna say it, but thanks. It's obviously my hockey brain. My hockey sense is so good.
So there you have it, fellas. That is the simulator. Mike gets the trophy.
Cool. The simulated
gets
trophy.
the other trophy. Yeah, well, yeah, because we were not allowed to see each other for however long. Yeah, we'll have to. I'll send you an image of a trophy.
Can you post the image of the trophy on this on the page when this podcast goes live?
Absolutely, I will do that.
Can we also post
and the loser trophy too.
Can we also post the loser trophy for Pat?
Yeah, no question.
So the one thing that if we did this again, or if we ever do this again, I'm surprised you didn't have us come up with team names.
Oh, good point. Yeah, I didn't think of that. We should have done that. Why didn't we do that? Bad job by me.
Well, now we know for next time.
Well, did you have one in mind, Mike?
Oh, I don't know. The fighting. I'm looking around the room. The fighting bobbleheads.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So next time we do something like this, team names will be a necessity, of course, and we'll have to make sure that we can say them on a podcast that does not have an explicit rating.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
That's part of the deal. So that'll do it for this episode. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me. Mike, congratulations.
Thanks.
Jeremy, congratulations on second place.
Thank you.
And Aaron, congratulations on being the person to most accurately predict your team's results.
Thank you very much.
Because he's a Leafs fan.
Gentlemen,
he's a Leafs fan. He's realistic. He knows deep down just exactly how good his team is.
That's what I told you.
You hope for better, but deep down you know just how good they really are.
I'm full of optimism every game, but no more often than not they're going to lose.
But even when they do better than you expected, you're still pissed off that they didn't do better than that.
Correct.
Yeah, I know how it goes.
Yeah, I've watched one game with you guys. It was in November of this year, whatever it was. And I wasn't really paying attention to the game, but based on the conversation, I just assumed that the Leafs were losing like 12-0. And then I look up at the end, and I think they won the game.
Yeah, they won it overtime.
What? Did they overtime?
Yeah, they won it overtime.
Was that this year? I thought that was the year before.
I don't know. They all blend together.
They all blend together. Time doesn't mean anything anymore.
But the point is taken. They were not losing. I think they were actually winning as we were complaining about how terrible they are.
Give me a second.
Yeah. And that's my takeaway.
Okay.
What, are you looking up when it was?
No,
it was when Mike Babcock. Mike Babcock was the coach.
Yeah, so it was November 9th. So they lost to Philly in the shootout.
Okay. A shootout.
Yes.
Okay.
That's crap.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, they didn't.
Yeah,
they didn't get blown out.
No, but that started their 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 game losing streak, which resulted in Mike Babcock being fired.
Which we were at that game in Las Vegas. That was delightful.
Yeah.
And well, now everyone in the league is not coaching.
Well, I know. I mean, the Leafs are undefeated in the last few weeks. It's fantastic. They're going to go the rest of the season undefeated. They're amazing.
Yeah. It's a beautiful day, and if you Leafs TV or whatever it's called now, I'm sure they're just showing classic Leaf games where they win.
They are.
You can yell at those teams.
They are. It's called Sportsnet Ontario.
Yeah.
Is that all they're showing now?
For a Toronto sports team that actually matters these days, they're re-showing the entire Raptors playoff run from last year, so that's kind of nice.
Yeah, that is fun. Tonight, I believe, is Game 7 as we record this on Tuesday.
Yeah, I have them all taped, but I'm rewatching them for sure.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
And that's the disappointing
even
thing.
the games they lose is
amongst
fun.
all these these shutdowns of the leagues. I mean, the Leafs weren't winning the Cup anyway this year, so whatever. They're golfing a little bit earlier, but the Raptors actually had a chance. That's a big bummer that the NBA is done.
It is sad, yeah. And I was sad too with baseball not starting. Yesterday, Major League Baseball put up the 2019 Home Run Derby, where Vlad went just crazy. So did Jock Peterson. And after I watched the second round of that, with Vlad and Jock Peterson, I kind of felt like I needed like a cigarette and a nap. Like it was incredible to watch.
I thought people would be happy because instead of like a stupid number of baseball games this year, you're going to have maybe like just an annoying amount of baseball games, or who knows, maybe just like a reasonable amount.
It's the everydayness. Like it's there's nothing to set my schedule to now. Right? Like for me, I mean, Aaron and Jeremy, you guys have kids who kind of set your schedule for you. But I mean, for me, I sort of set schedules around sports and like what's on when, and like I'm going to eat during the game while I watch the game. And now I'm just sort of floating around, and
it makes you realize how much, well, for me at least, how much sports I watch. As soon as and just like cold turkey, all leagues. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Once you take away basketball and hockey in full swing and early baseball and take out Formula One and stuff, and it's just like there's no sports. It's like I have anything to watch on TV. TV sucks.
Yeah, and like there's only so much Netflix and stuff you can watch too, and yeah, God forbid you have to start talking to people in your house. Like, whew, scary times, fellas.
Oh yeah. Well, thanks for running the simulator. Good job.
Yeah, well, hey, thanks for participating. Thanks for sending your teams. Thanks for the time this afternoon. Always appreciate you guys coming on. So thanks for joining me today.
Thanks very much, Sean.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, Sean.
So for everyone out there, thank you for listening. As I said at the top of the show, we're going to keep it light over the next few weeks. I think we have another sports one coming up. We have a couple sort of public history type things. They're going to be on theme for the show, but they're going to be a little lighter. And we're going to try and go weekly during all the shutdowns and stuff because, as I just said, I'm running out of stuff for me to listen to and to watch, stuff that I find interesting. So if anyone's like me, and I hope you're not, but if you are, we'll find new content for you, put it out there. So everyone, please stay safe. Follow the rules and regulations put forth. Listen to the experts, the professionals, the Dr. Tams of the world, and follow all of the protocols that are in place. And please do stay safe. And as always, if you want to get in touch with the show with ideas, stuff you might want to hear at this time, please email us, historyslam@gmail.com. So we'll be back with you again next week. But until then, don't go out. But if you do and see Enrico Palazzo, please say hi for me.
Thanks for listening to the History Slam podcast. Be sure to check out Active History for more features, articles, and be sure to subscribe on iTunes.